These are violent attacks recorded in Africa in the first 5 months of 2018. Many are by groups fighting in the ongoing civil wars in South Sudan and the Central African Republic. Others are riots against governments in southeastern Africa. But these are different.
This is from 7
They're
years ago.
attacks by Islamist militant groups. Some claim to be branches of the Islamic State, while others claim to be Al-Qaeda. Both groups are usually associated with the Middle East, but for the past decade, Islamist militant groups have been spreading across Africa, where they've continued to find places to organize and launch attacks. Their success has pushed these fragile states into deeper turmoil, and it's made the region one of the most dangerous in the world. To understand how these terrorist groups got to Africa and why they're so successful there, it helps to start in Nigeria. Nigeria has the biggest population and economy in Africa. Wealth industry and major cities are mostly in the south, while the north is poor, marginalized, isolated, and home to most of Nigeria's Muslim population. It was here that a radical Islamist group called Boko Haram took shape and turned violent in 2009. They started razing villages, slaughtered men and women, and kidnapped children who were forced to carry out suicide attacks. The Nigerian government cracked down, but the group continued to grow. In 2014, they got international attention when they kidnapped close to 300 schoolgirls in Chibok.
Isn't Algeria packed with them too? My mother is a judge at the Algerian Supreme Court and she gets tons of terrorists. Oh, Algeria is unfortunately also a deep vein for, yes, this kind of, no, it's not a don't say that situation. Yes, modern Algeria definitely has a lot of issues with this as well. Isn't France the only country that still has almost full power over their colonies and have their own Rothschilds to exploit the resources of their colonies? Yes and no. I mean, these colonies still have all of their finances handled by the French, yes. And if you know anything about the French, they never forgive a country for liberating itself, whether it be Haiti or even Algeria.
276.
Thank you, Ozzy, for the
By then,
subs.
they controlled a huge swath of territory in northern Nigeria, where they imposed strict Sharia law and declared it an Islamic caliphate. In 2015, they became affiliated with the Islamic State, which had a caliphate of its own in Iraq and Syria. Within a few years, the group killed nearly 25,000 people and was on track to become the deadliest terror group in the world, eventually surpassing ISIS. 5 African countries backed by the US, UK, and France formed a task force to battle Boko Haram. By April 2015, they'd liberated major towns and seemed to push Boko Haram out. But 3 years later, Boko Haram is still active. The group had shifted its focus to the Lake Chad region, one of the poorest places in the world. The lake touches the borders of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, but none of the state governments have any real presence here. This is where Boko Haram is operating. They've been raiding local villages for food and capturing men to serve as fighters. In 2016, the group split into two. As Boko Haram's attacks grew more and more violent, this group, the Islamic State West Africa, started offering protection to villages in danger. They also provided stability and even water supplies to a region collapsing under a food crisis in exchange for attacks and recruits. In the absence of a strong central government, they've moved further into Nigeria and Niger, where they've launched attacks of their own and are...
This is a video from 7 years ago from Vox talking about Islamist militant groups gaining strength in Africa. And even Boko Haram itself is like... Boko Haram itself, if I'm not mistaken, is also an offshoot that turned into its own thing. Its own separate thing. But they're all offshoots of like the same Daesh, ISIS, Al-Qaeda style forms of militancy. We saw many different versions of this in Syria. HDS is a direct example of this. HDS was an offshoot of ISIS-affiliated groups, al-Nusra, in Syria. And the common principle, I guess, is that they all are... HDS is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, sorry. Well, yeah, Al-Qaeda. Al-Nusra was Al-Qaeda, and HDS is an offshoot of al-Nusra, isn't it? Al-Nusra is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda in Syria. Yes, they left Al-Qaeda in 2016 and formed HDS in 2017. HTS was an offshoot of an Al-Qaeda affiliate, and ISIS itself is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda as well.
Are officially affiliated with the Islamic State. Exploiting and terrorizing locals in ungoverned areas has become a successful strategy, keeping these militant groups active, but it doesn't stop here. The strategy is being used by terrorists all across the continent. Lake Chad is part of the Sahel, a narrow band of territory that stretches across north-central Africa. The conditions that make Lake Chad ideal for Boko Haram and ISWA extend across this whole region. The population is mostly Muslim and vulnerable. Ethnic conflicts are rampant, food is scarce, poverty is rife, and most importantly, there's almost no presence of a government. Islamist militant groups have been filling these spaces at a staggering pace. 7 years ago, Islamist militant groups took over northern Mali and declared it a caliphate for 10 months, before a French military intervention drove them back into the desert. Today, they've banded together and are affiliated with Al-Qaeda. A group called ISGS broke away and is now affiliated with the Islamic State. This part of Mali remains ungoverned and violent 7 years after the intervention. Both of these groups are fighting for various militias in the conflict. Meanwhile, both are attacking foreigners, including the French embassy in 2018 and the 2017 ambush of the U.S. Special Forces in Niger.
Fox News is learning that 12 U.S. soldiers, mostly Green Berets, were ambushed by...
Most of these groups in Africa were originally founded as unlinked before proclaiming allegiance to a leader such as Baghdadi or the Taliban. For Boko Haram, this was done during the height of ISIS power and was then rescinded. A lot of groups did this. Okay, but they're operational. They're the only operational forms of Islamic State militancy right now. And the main Islamic State telegrams and the main Islamic State propaganda outlets directly celebrate their operations in Africa. And now they are responsible for 90% of all ISIS operations, because almost all of the ISIS operations, almost all the Islamic State operations in Iraq, Syria, and also all around the globe have been reduced to virtually nothing. And since last year, I think last year Africa was around 70%, and now it's 88%.
by a larger force of ISIS-linked militants.
Islamist militant groups are finding success in other ungoverned spaces as well. ISIS claims to have launched 10 attacks in 2018 in Libya, where civil war has raged since 2011. In Somalia, an ISIS-affiliated group split from Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, shouts out the Hillary Rodham Clinton on that one. But ISIS is not a real organization at this point. This is what I'm trying to explain. It's like how right-wingers refer to Antifa as an organization despite having no central links or organizational ties. Sure, but they don't have to be. They don't have to be because they're doing what we understand as terrorism. And because of that, they don't have to have like a central governance structure at all. They can operate in a decentralized manner. And I don't even think that they're decentralized or as decentralized as you say they are. HTS, Taliban, Muqawamah have been against Daesh since its formation. Ironically, Israeli funded the Middle East factions of Daesh. I would be surprised if Westerners and Israeli had proxy vendors funneling Daesh decentralized network. I mean, look at the RSF. Look at the RSF in Sudan. We know now, without any suspicion whatsoever, that they are directly being funded by the United Arab Emirates. Someone is giving these guys weapons.
Al-Qaeda group. It's made this whole part of Africa one of the most dangerous places in the world. The US and France have both stepped up their presence with several military bases across the Sahel. But drone strikes and special forces alone are not the solution to the Islamist terrorism in Africa. As long as there are places with poverty, conflicts, and no government, terrorist groups will be here.
Yeah, and then obviously, as long as they're there, there needs to be Western intervention because these countries are not wealthy enough, powerful enough, and have been kept poor aggressively through colonial exploits that they don't have the tools to be able to combat against this kind of terror. And we here in the West look at that and go, oh, it's because they're kind of barbaric and they just can't deal with it because they're just like, this is how it is, you know, they're black, they're aggressive. That's why there's so much violence. Or they're brown, they're Arab. They don't know any better. That's the reason why they're killing each other. You need a Western force to come in and tame the beast. Not dissimilar to how the British colonialists actually presented that argument. You know, the white savior, the white man's burden. If they come in and tame these backwards cultured, violent barbarians, They are backwards, though. Not to say we aren't, but like they are. Dude, we need to do something about groups like this, in my opinion. Why the can't we just like use the sats to drone strike these groups? I don't get it. The average Ameribrain. Man, these groups are one of the only times I don't like seeing U.S. troops killed. These guys are true evil. 25-month subscriber. Bro, death and destruction is death and destruction. Like, what do you mean? How do you justify Western intervention in this situation? It's Western intervention that plays a role in developing the volatility to begin with. It's literally Western intervention that causes these places to be dirt poor. There is individual mismanagement from these puppet states in many instances as well, because they are puppets to the West that then bring in further economic Western intervention, IMF loans and the like, relegate complete control over how things are supposed to be governed in these countries that are resource-rich countries, and therefore they want a pliant leader to allow Western capital to come in and do whatever the they want, so that you can have the cheapest resources, the cheapest minerals that you can possibly get, so your iPhone prices are manageable. They come in with the World Bank and IMF, and if someone doesn't comply with those demands, they kill them, and then they put a new person in charge that will comply. Nowadays, there's at least somewhat of an alternative out there that is offering better loans that they will forgive, loans without the additional demands being made, that play a better role in developing these countries, and America doesn't like that. And instead of competing against China, especially when these countries leverage the relationships that they have with China against the West, instead of competing with them by offering similar loans, for example, they just go in and do what they do best, which is fuck shit up. But even the very barbaric nature of the, Sahel region is not because of genetic inferiority or cultural inferiority. It's a direct consequence of their material conditions. It's a direct consequence of these areas not being allowed to develop and improve on their material conditions, is because it's much better for whichever foreign interest to consistently dominate them and steal their natural resources. So the very fact that this volatility creates a breeding ground for extremist terrorism, for example, is also still created by Western intervention in the first place. You create the conditions for extremism to manifest, then you might even help get them, you might help like with the logistics necessary to start building these groups. Then those groups wreak havoc. Then you turn around and say, hey, we now have to have direct military intervention here because you can't deal with it on your own because you have no money. And the instability continues. Another significant component to understand the conflict in Nigeria is the farmer-herder dynamic. A significant portion of the violence is over land use. The pastoralist groups are primarily Muslim, and the farmers are mixed but largely Christian. This is the angle that right-wingers in the West are exploiting to create a religious dimension and genocide of Christians. Yeah. I actually don't agree with China's loans either. They only forgive the loan if the country had the loan, gives China whatever was built. That is definitely some America stuff. Yeah, but the level of intervention China demands is clearly, in the eyes of these countries and their rulers, far better than the conditions that the United States is offering. Don't you think that these guys would still work with the United States of America, regardless of its history of chattel slavery or additional violence? They're not stupid. America's just not offering them better loans.